And welcome everybody to another episode of Tidal Flooding Talk, brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition in conjunction with our broadcast partner at Tri-X 57 News. The gang is all here for another episode of Tidal Flooding Talk. Dan, Palma, what's going on? What's new? What's happening?
Well, we got Halloween coming up, so getting excited about that.
Are you a big Halloween person, Palma? I don't know. You might have told me this. Are you?
I mean, I like Halloween.
Okay.
It's definitely up there for me, but nothing comes close to Christmas for me personally, but I do enjoy fall festivities.
Okay. Is there like Palma at Party's house, a Halloween party at Palma's house, like level of liking Halloween?
No, but maybe there will be now that we're going to be moving into a
That's right.
bigger house, maybe I can start hosting some.
Okay. Well, don't leave us out on the invite list.
Right. Yeah. Could be a TFT Halloween special next year, maybe. We'll see.
That's very much in the realm of possibility. Dan, I feel like you could be a sneaky Halloween guy.
It's increasing. Let's just say with kids, a 3-year-old and 6-year-old, my excitement for Halloween grows. I'm still like Palma Christmas all the way, but Halloween is definitely gaining some steam.
Okay. Gotcha.
How about you?
Man, I mean, like, I never look for a plan on Halloween. I mean, if Palma invites me over her house, I'll get dressed up, but I'm not looking for the plan. So that's my Halloween spiel on that. Anyway, let's go from, well, you know what? This actually maybe a Halloween costume, a shark costume, a Sharknado costume, baby shark costume. I don't know. We'll ask our expert here, but we are talking about using weather sensors on sharks to track hurricanes. And we have Aaron Carlisle, an associate professor at the University of Delaware, who's joined us here with an awesome Zoom background to talk to us all about it. So, well, we'll have to start with this. Have you dressed as a shark for Halloween before? And how do you feel about sharks as a Halloween costume?
I think they're great, but I have not personally dressed as a shark before. But, the future, who knows? There's so many Halloweens to go. I'm sure it'll happen at some point, but not yet.
Pop up. In a sign of half solidarity, I didn't have a shark tie. I had a whale tie, though. I figured I'd go with the marine animal.
Close enough.
I figured it's close enough. All right, so we're talking to you. We're still in the I don't want to say the peak of hurricane season, but an elevated time of hurricane season. So we thought this episode, was appropriate to have you on here. We saw an article, I was reading this and I said, hey, this is really cool. Sharks equipped with sensors provide new clues for hurricane forecasting. I don't want you to spill all the beans in the first, minute here, but just kind of give us an idea of what you and your team did find.
Well, this is an ongoing project. So, we're very much in the kind of first part of this project, even though we've been doing this for several years at this point. It's COVID and everything else really hit supply chains with electronics. And so these new tags, we're working with a company in Scotland called Sea Mammal Research Unit, SMURU, in St. Andrews, Scotland, University of St. Andrews. And they have this new tag that they developed that provides us with real-time or near real-time oceanographic observations. So data from the ocean that transmits whenever the shark fin or the tag is at the surface. And so the general idea is that our job and our task in this project is to try to help push this technology forward where we can start to use these tags to obtain data on what's going on out in the ocean, particularly around hurricane season. Our particular goal for the Mid-Atlantic Bight is hurricane season is obviously in the East Coast of the US. It's a big issue. More data makes better predictions. And so the idea is we can, as my graduate student, Caroline Wernicke says, we're going to give the sharks a backpack and a job. And so let them get to work.
How long has, I know animals have been tagged for a long time, and as technology improves, the number of animals tagged grows and the number of ways people can track them, from scientists to people at home. I know when I was a reporter with the Press of Atlantic City, to me, I was amazed when Mary Lee surfaced up and down the Jersey Shore. And that was my first kind of viral moment with sharks. So I guess how long has it been going on? And how fast has it been growing with the advance of technology?
Yeah, so I mean, people started it depends on what you're talking about in terms of tracking. People have put acoustic tags, which are little pingers that transmit ultrasonic signals out into the water that you can pick up, and they've been doing that since the 60s. But the kind of technology we're using that is satellite relay data, that so basically using satellites to collect the data that the tags transmit into space, is that really started in the kind of the mid 80s. And it was in the late 90s that it really started kind of taking off. And with, as we've all seen, technology has been changing incredibly fast. And so with miniaturization of computer boards and circuits and batteries, the tools we can have and bring to bear to answer these kinds of questions has just increased really quickly. And so that's why we're able to do this now where we haven't been able to do it in the past very well, at least for sharks. People have been actually putting tags on elephant seals and sea turtles and things to do this kind of stuff for a while, but they're air breathers. And so if you breathe air, you have to come to the surface, which is great. But they also have a lot of restrictions in terms of how they get used because obviously most marine mammals and reptiles are very endangered, threatened, so you can't really just go put stuff on them very easily. Whereas sharks are kind of everywhere, all over the place, so they are an untapped resource in this kind of area. But yeah, so it's really kind of been for satellite tagging in the mid 80s really is when it started.
So my first thought is, how do you safely put one of these sensors on a shark?
Well, it's more dangerous probably for the sharks than it is for us. It looks exciting, but the sharks are much more sensitive and delicate than most of us people in a lot of ways. But so it's we do what people normally do when they tag sharks. So we basically go out on a boat, we attract them to the boat however we can. We generally use chum or burley, as they call in like Australia, but like basically fish guts and goo and stuff like that, blood that we put in the water makes a wonderful, delicious scent trail that goes out over the ocean. Any shark swimming around will smell it and start following that trail back to the boat. And once they're around the boat, we basically have little hand lines. So basically like a length of rope with a hook on the end of it that you can basically just throw in the water in front of them. They take it, and then you basically just pull them to the back of the boat. You put a tail wrap, a rope around the tail, and then you basically string them out on the back of the boat or along the swim step. And once they're strung out, kind of pulled, tail and head kind of pulled apart so they're straight, they don't really do much. And so then we basically kind of tie them off and we do our work. We're a bit like a pit crew. Once the animal's secured, we jump into action, go collect, get measurements, and we get biological samples, and we work as quickly as we can to put the tag on the animal because the longer the animal is being restrained, the harder it is on the animal. We make every effort possible to make sure these animals are hale and healthy when they move away and swim away because if a shark dies after we put a $7,000 tag on it, it doesn't help any of us. So we do everything we can to kind of minimize the stress on the animals. And we do everything with the eye on safety. And so it's actually not that dangerous. It looks way more exciting than it is when you see it, but we're professionals kind of in some way at this point. We know what we're doing, and so we're careful. We're very cognizant of the health of the people and the animals, and we put the tags on and we let them go, and we hope for the best. And every time you let them go, you're like, there swims away a lot of money. And you just hope you hear from it again.
So just in general though, like, so is this like an all day affair? Like, how does this work? Like, are you guys, is it one day? Is it half a day? Like,
that's a great question. And so, normally the kind of sharks we've been tagging are what we call pelagic sharks. So the pelagic is the open ocean, kind of up in the water column, but oceanic sharks, ones that live offshore pretty far. And those are things like blue sharks or mako sharks. And so those, we have to go the continental shelf on the East Coast, so goes out really far. So we have to go offshore like 50 or 60 miles before we can even find the animals. So it takes us 3 to 4 hours to get out there. And then we fish for 6 or 7 hours, and then we have to come back. So usually we do day trips, but we've done a few overnight ones on a few boats we can talk about later if it comes up. But yeah, it's pretty, usually if it's day trips are much better, much easier, much more maneuverable. But if you go out for a few days and nothing's there, you're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Are you bringing back dinner or?
Yeah, you know, if you can, usually the various someone on the boat usually will have some rod and reel, and there'll be mahi or something like that around. They'll start chucking them in, and when you're lucky, you can. But usually, the kind of hooks we put in the water are big hooks for big animals, and not something we bring back for dinner. So we try, but usually we're focused on doing our job, so we don't spend a lot of time trying to bring home tasty things. But you never know, because sometimes it does happen.
All right, well, we're going to take a brief snack break here. We'll come back on the other side talking all about this on Tidal Flooding Talk. Thanks to the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, your flood insurance bills are lower and your streets safer from the reality of flooding. Since beginning in 2013, we build more resilient shoreline communities. Our member towns develop and share in best practices that anticipate future concerns and create flooding solutions. From our town-specific free web app for flooding information to our weekly Tidal Flooding Talk show, we focus on flooding 24/7. Visit www.njcoastalcoalition.com for more.
Hello and welcome back. You are watching Tidal Flooding Talk. We are brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, and we would like to remind our viewers to keep storm drains clear. Leaves, trash, and yard debris clog storm drains, making flooding worse. Do your part. Never dump grass clippings, oil, or other waste into drains or ditches. Keep them clear. Keeping them clear helps protect your street from unnecessary flooding.
All right, and continuing our conversation with Aaron Carlisle here, we were talking about shark track, or using weather sensors on sharks to track hurricanes here. Let me ask you this: is this something that is being done in other places in the world, or is this something, like the first line here in the story is are taking an innovative approach to filling critical ocean gaps with sharks? So I'm wondering, are you the only people doing this, or are there somewhere else in the world where this is happening too that you know of?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We are not the first people to do this, right? And so there's groups in Hawaii, there's a group, University of Hawaii is kind of working in this space, Stanford University is working in this space, and we all kind of work together. That's the good thing about science is it's very collaborative, and so we share a lot of information, we work together, we publish together, we do everything. So, but we're all kind of on the cusp of trying to figure out how do we use sharks in this manner, and there's a lot of very particular difficulties in trying to use these technologies and approaches with sharks as opposed to, as I mentioned before, elephant seals or things that breathe air, because they don't have to come to the surface. And when you think about a very expensive electronic piece of equipment, you don't just let it run, you have to turn it on and off to save battery life. And so you think about how can I program this tag to collect the best amount, the most data, the most optimized data collection and transmission, given the variability you see in what sharks do, because as probably most people know, sharks don't necessarily need to come to the surface very often. And that's a drawback, but that's actually a strength as well for this approach. And the reason that's actually kind of good, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. Finish what you're saying.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that we've moved into the space of using sharks is that one of the main ways we get data for parts of the ocean we don't get a lot of observations from, which is the continental shelf, so the kind of coastal area, which is kind of counterintuitive. You think the coastal area would have more observations, but it actually doesn't. And so we have this glider picket line. So we have these basically robot gliders that we go out, autonomous underwater vehicles that go and they fly around the ocean recording data. And they're great, they're amazing tools, but they're very expensive and they don't stay out as long. And because they're so slow, most of the data they end up sending back to us ends up being discarded because it doesn't give us new information in terms of making the predictions about the ocean and providing new insight. So the sharks, because they come up and pop up randomly, every bit of information you get from them is very useful. And these tags will last many months, if not over a year. And so once you put them on, the shark is out just doing its sharky thing, transmitting data. And the idea is, we're still working on this, but hopefully we'll get there, and I think we will pretty quickly, is that you're going to have this fleet of tagged sharks swimming around the ocean, transmitting random bits of information that fill in all the gaps where we don't have the resources to get these observations. Because glider missions, there's 6 or 7 kind of lines that they kind of mow the lawn with on these gliders along the East Coast. And each time these gliders individually each cost $500 to $700 or $1,000 or $1 million a pop. every mission is $50,000 to $100,000. They stay out for a month or so. And as I said, most of the data actually gets thrown out. And so they're amazing tools, but in terms of covering a lot of territory, they're not actually that great. Otherwise, you have to send up boats, which are very expensive. And so each one of these tags is, less than $10,000. That price point is variable because this is a new technology, but $6,000 to $7,000 probably each. And they last many months and they stay on the shark and the shark goes all over. And so you can imagine that you have all these kind of randomly moving animals filling in all the gaps where you have these areas with the gliders and the boats that provide great data.
Now, what kind of information is it that is helping predict the hurricanes?
Sure. So it's all about, and I mean, as as weather people, you probably know this better than I, but really what drives hurricanes is the heat in the ocean. And so it's the ocean heat content. So if you think of like, a tube of water from the surface to the bottom, if you took it out and you measured how much heat is in that, more heat means stronger hurricanes. And so we need data from below the surface. And that's why, satellite oceanography is an amazing tool, but it shows you the skin of the ocean. It doesn't show you anything deeper. So that's why we need these other mechanisms, these other ways to get data from below the surface. And so sharks, that's where they live. And so, and same thing with the seals and everything like that. So you put a tag on them and they're constantly diving up and down. And so the idea is by diving up and down through the water, they're recording the temperature and the salinity and all these other things that are important for making these calculations. And when they come to the surface, when that tag breaks the surface, it then starts kind of yelling into saying, here's my data, here are my data, here are my data. And then the satellites pick it up and they transmit it to us real time. And then those data get forwarded to all the kind of oceanographic integrated ocean observing systems. So Maricoo's, for example, is one of our partners. That's the Mid-Atlantic node of the integrated oceanographic observing system, which is where we actually get a lot of our ocean data that supplies us with weather reports and climate monitoring, all this kind of stuff. And so all these data get ported out to the people that use it. I'm not an atmospheric, I'm not a weatherman. I don't understand most of this stuff, but I do understand sharks. And so what's cool is that this is a way that we can actually use our knowledge of these animals to help inform hurricane predictions, right? So again, like the idea of taking a shark, giving it a backpack and giving it a job. And so it's like, let them do it. And the idea is the more data we get, the better our predictions will be. And the better off we'll be able to predict where these hurricanes are going to make landfall, how strong they're going to be, because of all that subsurface data that we get.
All right, we're going to take one more break here. We'll be back with you on the other side with Tidal Flooding Talk.
Welcome back to this week's Tidal Flooding Talk, and at least for this week, we are dubbing it Shark Week here on Tidal Flooding Talk, our version of it. And Aaron, I wanted to start you off with this question. How many sharks, roughly, not going to hold you an exact figure, have you tagged so far? And obviously, you can't control where they go, but based on where they're pinging and where you're getting the data from, is it a wide swath of the Atlantic Ocean? Like, where are sharks' territories in the ocean? And like, do they correlate with where hurricanes go? I mean, I know sharks generally like warm waters, but we find them off Jersey and Delaware, and the water isn't always warm here. But like, are they popping up in those areas where you guys and meteorologists want them to pop up, where that data is scarce and areas that can be very helpful?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so, yeah, so one of the first things we had to do as part of this project is use kind of go through the scientific literature and learn everything we could about all the shark species that we might encounter and say, who's going to be the best one to give this backpack to give them a job. And so we spend a lot of time doing that because the sharks have to move up and down through the water column and they have to come to the surface enough where they have the opportunity to transmit data. And so it ends up that calls out a lot of species because most species don't come to the surface in the way that we need them to. And so we ended up kind of coming with a ranking of like a potential species to carry these tags. And the kind of the best ones were things like we're already targeting, like mako sharks and blue sharks, tiger sharks would be good, hammerhead sharks, juvenile white sharks would probably be pretty good too. And so we have a list of candidate species. So whenever we go out and tag, we kind of keep our eye open for any of these sharks that show up. If we do, and if they're big enough, we'll stick a tag on them. But at this point, we just started getting tags to put out really this year. And so it's pretty new. And so, but I can tell you from what we know about where these animals go, the ocean is where the sharks live and they move all over. And yes, there's some that are more cold adapted and they like being in cooler waters, some like really tropical waters. But the good thing about the mid-Atlantic bight where we live is that you're in this transition area where it's either very hot or very cold. So you get a mix of everything. And so we can basically, our idea is by sticking out a lot of tags on a lot of different animals, they'll be kind of all over at any point in the year. And so, but again, this is new. And every time we put out tags, we've probably put out, I think to answer your question, about 8 or so far. And every time we've been trickling it out. So we've been trickling tags out because we don't have very many. So every time we put them out, we stick them on an animal, we wait, and then we see what happens. And then we go, okay, that worked. Oh, that didn't work. So how do we modify the next tag we put out? And so it's been this very iterative process, kind of working through the difficulties. Because again, when you're doing this kind of stuff, no one's done it before, really, in a lot of ways. And so we're trying to figure it out. And so we're learning a lot every time, but we still have a long way to go. So I can't really answer in terms of how well it's going to end up working, but we're at the point where we're very confident the tags are starting to work. And now it's more about just getting access to the animals. And so there are not that many out there anymore because, there's been a lot of overfishing of these animals, unfortunately, for the species we're targeting. So if you go out, you're lucky if you see 1 or 2 in a day for the most part. So it's not a very quick process, I would say.
I'll end with this question here. Going into next hurricane season, 2026, what's like? Is there a goal that you have for next season when it comes to this?
Yeah, absolutely. The hope is to put out 10 tags pretty early on, like late May, early June, so they'll be out there and we'll start getting data. Because half the effort is not just getting the data from the sharks, but then getting it ported from the sharks to the end users, the stakeholders that are going to use it. And so the data have to be managed and processed in a certain way where it's usable for the various end users. And again, the hurricane prediction is our main goal, but these data go into all these different models that are used for every different kind of purpose you could imagine, like climate change research, atmosphere, like weather prediction, ocean models, just so we can understand how the ocean works. They're used for a lot of reasons. So our hope is to get out a good number of tags this next season, next year, and that'll be when we actually start to get data that can inform some of our predictions. So knock on wood, that'll happen.
All right. Very good. Very good. Well, thank you so much, Aaron. We really appreciate you coming on. We're not done just yet. We're going to do what we do at the end of every episode, which is the one thing we can't stop talking about, tidal flooding or otherwise. Dan, I'll kick it off with you.
Well, I just my favorite time of the year, you guys know I'm a fall lover. I'm a huge foliage lover as well. It's one of the times of year I miss being in Jersey, not because Jersey has better foliage than where I am in PA, but Jersey, you just push the leaves into the street and they suck them up for you. And I remember that when I'm kind of raking and bagging and chopping up my 2 acres of tons of leaves in my lawn. So yearning for Jersey's leaf collecting process is my final thought.
Okay. Palma, you got anything along public works for your
Well, it's funny because, I live on the water in Atlantic City now, and I'll be moving offshore, and I didn't even think about leaves until this very moment. Like, I guess it'll be like I'll definitely appreciate the fall more because it'll feel like fall but at the same time, raking leaves does not sound fun.
Yeah, I mean, you can jump in the pile when you're done, if you want to do that. I am going to go with something that just happened the day we recorded. Jane Goodall died today. RIP, 91 years old, if I'm correct. And like, there's just some things that like kind of just hit a little different. And like, I don't know, I feel like she was such a part of like my 90s, early 2000s childhood. And of course, before that, I think she even inspired the Nickelodeon show The Wild Thornberrys to an extent, which I was a big fan of growing up. So
Yeah, Joe, she was a Cornell adjunct professor, and I actually got to go to one of her
really,
talks up at Cornell, one of the best lectures I ever went to. So that hit home with me too. That's a really good one.
yeah, that, and you know what? Let's point on this. She didn't even go to college. Like, she started studying this without going to college, and then when she went to college, she just started in the graduate program. What are you going to do? Tell Jane Goodall she has to start at a bachelor? Really incredible, and really incredible life for her.
Yep.
Go on, Aaron. Now it's your time.
So yeah, Jane Goodall, amazing. So it's hard to follow up that, but because I'm a shark person, I'm gonna ask a shark question to you.
Oh,
We think about for my classes. But what do you think the oldest living shark species is in terms of longevity? Because thinking about, Jane Goodall died at 91, a long life.
how about a hammerhead?
Hammerhead, but how long do you think they live? That's the
Oh, 50.
50.
I was going to say like 75.
75, okay.
Yeah, I was going with, well, I guess like if they're dying of natural causes, I would like not human. I would say probably 89.
89.
That's great. That's actually that's beyond what most people think. But so there's a shark called the Greenland shark, which is a deep water shark, and it actually lives somewhere on the order of 300 to 400 years old.
Oh my God.
They actually don't really start to reproduce mature until they're about 150 years old. So there are some of these sharks, there's some debate about it, but they live a long time is what everyone agrees on. But there's some Greenland sharks swimming around out there, probably were around the time the Pilgrims landed in Massachusetts, which is kind of cool to think about. Yeah.
So here's a follow-up question, because maybe I'm just not even thinking, is that like the oldest living like longevity species?
I mean, there's some, there's jellyfish that don't die. They kind of regenerate. There's clones of things. So it gets messy in terms of that. But yeah, in terms of vertebrates, outside of reptiles, like you've heard of like some of the big tortoises that, Darwin collected. So they live hundreds of years, but I mean, so right now I think that they're probably the oldest living vertebrate on the planet. So
okay, yeah, especially for like that size, right? I mean, I don't know how big
they get pretty big.
Like
15, 20 feet or so.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking Finding Nemo, the turtle. Now that's just one particular type of shark.
Yeah, no, but a lot of them live to 75 to 100 years, and a lot of other fishes, rockfish, things like that in the North Pacific, live to 200 years or so. And so a lot of these animals that live in the open ocean actually have these very long life histories that we're just now starting to kind of scratch. And so that's one of the fun things that we get to play around when you work in marine science, is learning some of these random things. And that's one thing I like to tell people, is that there's so much to learn that everyone's like, oh, everyone seems to think we know everything, but we know so little. And so I like to encourage people that we discover these things all the time. And so get out there, learn things, do science. It's great.
Absolutely. Well,
do science.
Do science. Well, we're very pro do science here on this show. So Aaron, Carl, thank you so much for joining us. Where can we find out more about you?
Go to University of Delaware. I have some links there. Otherwise, Maricoo's has some great information about it. And we try to get out there. I'm not very good at social media. My graduate students are. And so we have a little bit of a online presence, but probably not as much as we should. But University of Delaware, that's a good place to start.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely tag University of Delaware on this. So anyway, thank you so much for the time. We appreciate it. And thank you to everybody for listening to this episode of Tidal Flooding Talk.